Fantastic. Welcome back to Dangerous Dialogues. Colby, you're a much better singer than I am. Do you know what? I've got fucking music degree and that just came out my face. How terrible was that?
It was the best love.
Well, I'm sure if you clicked on this video, you didn't come here to hear us sing. And I guess you're grateful that I'm probably not going to do that again. Welcome to this week's Dangerous Dialogues talking about vaccination. I'm Tom. That's Colby. Although you're probably that way on everyone else's screens. I'm just going to do that. You know what? Fucking how many years of Zoom and we still doing this stupid fucking pointing thing?
I know.
You are actually that way on the other screen, but anyway. Cool. We are normally joined by Zoe, but unfortunately Zoe's not feeling very well today, which I mean fully see the irony doing a conversation about vaccination and Zoe not being very well. But hopefully you'll feel better soon, Zoe. Great. We're gonna get chatted. We're gonna get chatting. Really, is this going to be another one of those laughy ones like we had a few weeks ago?
We're going to get chatted.
We're going to get chatted, idiot. I've lived in England too long, haven't I?
You need to come home.
Cool. I guess let's sort of brief this conversation by just talking about what a vaccination is, if you don't already know, which I'm sure you do. It is a medical injection that you receive as a preventative towards illness, or to illness, I guess, getting worse. That's it. That's the whole thing, right? So why are we so scared of them, and why are they such a dangerous topic? What do you think, Colby?
I think sometimes I think people can be more scared of the actual needle as opposed to what's actually inside of the syringe. Yeah. Or so I think some people can be put off of vaccinations literally because of their fear of being stabbed with a needle. People can be put off of tattoos for the exact same purpose. They're scared of the needle. So sometimes I think that some people's opinions of certain vaccinations don't come from the vaccination itself. It comes from their fear of needles.
Right.
But yeah, that's obviously just one thought behind it.
I think I tend to agree with you, actually, which is a great way to start a conversation. Yeah, there is something about it that I hate needles. I really hate needles, and I've been getting. Sorry?
It's not natural.
It isn't natural. It's weird. It's creepy. I don't like a bit of metal going into my body. I just know it's necessary sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, yeah, I'd be a terrible drug addict, I always think, because I just couldn't do it. Gonna stick to the ones I can't use needles for, if I ever were to. We'll do that as a different conversation a different day. But yeah, it's funny, I have to go and get a flu jab every year. Because of my asthma, I always get offered the flu jab. And flu jabs make me laugh a lot because I don't like getting them, because I just the whole process of the needle and I doing it every year is just like, okay, here we go again. And I can't stop talking when I'm in with the nurse. I just keep talking. And I'm like, just so you know, I'm not going to shut up, because if I keep talking, I won't acknowledge what's going on.
It's the same as, the opposite process, when you go into the doctor's surgery and the nurse takes your blood.
Right.
For me, if I was getting weirdly enough, if I was getting a vaccination of some kind, I wouldn't talk. I would always look away, and I would be like, right, that's it, and I would hold the little thing on my arm. But when I see for taking blood, that's not. I see her putting the thing around your arm and
absolutely not.
I'm like, oh, you've been busy today, how's the weather? That's when I start to make loads of conversation, because I feel the process of
right,
they take something from me, which is funny, I guess.
It is mad, isn't it? It's funny because I think there's certain things in life that sort of unite us all in a way. And I think one of those things is that at some point we have probably all mostly received a vaccine. We were chatting before we went live here about the fact that as children we get so many. And I guess it's bizarre thinking about that when you're a grown adult, because it's not, you don't like you have a choice. They're just gonna happen.
Yeah. There's also things as well, like our mums probably got vaccinations or injections that affected us while we were in the womb.
Didn't even think about that. Yeah.
So, like, there was a specific, gosh, what was it? Women were either prescribed something or were given injections while they were pregnant, and it actually caused like birth defects in children.
Right.
And that's not uncommon. Like that can happen in several different things. God, when you're pregnant, they have to give you a bloody dictionary of things that could happen because they want to, like cover their own back. They want to give so many. If you do this, there could be X, Y, and Z consequence. If you do this, there could be X, Y, and Z consequence. But yeah, even with, like, I was literally thinking to Tom before we went live, I still have a little banana shaped scar on my foot from where I was given an injection in my foot from when I was like, and I mean teeny totty baby. And obviously I didn't have a say in that. It was just decided, and I don't even think it was something that my mum probably actively thought, I'm going to get this vaccination for Colby. It was probably sent through as a letter saying,
Sure.
here's your appointment for X vaccine.
Right.
And this is your time. And you would just turn up with your child and attend and let them jag you.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
But I suppose that goes into another like topic of not indoctrination. That's a bit
It's heavy.
hard. But I mean, just say the acceptance of just doing what you're told by a governing body, i.e. the NHS.
Yeah.
Like when you receive a letter through that is for anything that says that's got the NHS, and you know an NHS letter when you see it, when you open it, and it's like, this is your appointment time, be here on this day. But if you were to receive a letter through the NHS and it was like, this is the vaccination, like you have your flu jab, this is your flu jab, be here at this time. You question it, you just go.
No, I do, yeah. Although bizarrely, so interesting on that topic, so now it's a text rather than a letter. And I've had very different experiences because Scotland, where obviously we are both from, has an incredibly different NHS system from England. Certainly with my own experience, I would say they feel incredibly different. But in England, they seem to have outsourced so many of them. So you don't even go to doctors anymore. They send you to like Morrison's, where there's a chemist or something. And Morrison's refused to give me flu jabs because I have an egg allergy, and the flu jab has egg in. So as a kid in Scotland, when I got it, I would always have to stay in the waiting room for like an hour after just to see if I had a reaction with like an EpiPen on hand. So it's that balance, isn't it? That so yeah, I didn't actually have a flu jab last year because it was such a pain in the arse to try and get one. I thought, fuck it, if I get flu, I get flu. But yeah, it's kind of shit, isn't it?
That's so weird. I would never. I suppose you are probably the best example of someone that has lived in two different healthcare systems currently.
Sure.
But that is such a surreal and strange experience. Imagine like walking into Morrison's, picking up your shopping, and then be like, "Oh, may as well get my flu jab while I'm here." Like that's fucked up. That is fucked up. That's so weird.
It's because so many of them have like chemists and things in them.
So does a fucking Asda, but you wouldn't walk in and be like, "Jab me." That's so
I just want to pick up on one of the points that you made earlier, because Zoe's kind of commented here, even though she's not physically here, she's very much watching. And she mentioned that when she was pregnant with Riley, that she had to get quite a few injections and things, and that she had to get one in her bum. So I guess we were talking a lot about this and this, but as you've just mentioned, you get them in your feet sometimes. You have to get them in your gluteus maximus. It's not an enjoyable process for anyone, I imagine.
No.
But
Same.
it is weird, isn't it, that we sort of take almost when you're most vulnerable, that's when you have to get a vaccine, and that makes sense because you're vaccinating against the worst possible scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. There's just something that feels weird. It went out to me when you're like, take all the ill people, put them together, and that's why I don't like hospitals. I don't understand it. Yeah.
I understand the thought, the process, as in bring them all in the one place so that we can treat them all. Because how would you know that you were ill unless they were all in a specific? Totally get that, but then I totally understand the point that you've just made. Like, what? They're all ill. Like, what? Why would you put them all together?
Yeah.
Like, one person has chickenpox, and the other one has a sore throat. It's like, well, you're gonna have chickenpox and a sore throat, and you're like two completely different things. But
right,
yeah,
exactly. So, some stats. Zoe's usually our gal for this, but I did a little bit of research, and in 2016, according to the World Health Organization, world, not world. There you go. There's still some Scottish in me somewhere. World. 19.5 million children under the age of 1 had the DTP3 vaccine. I don't know much about that particular vaccine. I don't know the context of it. But that's a lot of young people. That's a lot of kids. And I get it, because you want people to grow up and be adults and not have some of the really, really shit things that we've had in the world, like typhoid and diphtheria, and well, I guess Ebola is still a kind of prevalent one, which is, I guess, why there's still vaccination programs that go on for that. But yeah, I guess just as a discussion point, it makes sense as young people that we're given the vaccines there and then, because then you have them for life. But then it really comes down to what your parents' opinions are on them, rather than your own, right?
and also there's certain diseases, and there's certain vaccinations that go along with the helping of not contracting those diseases.
Yeah.
Like, for example, us living in the UK, there is a minute percentage of us that could get a very serious disease, like when was the last case that you heard of someone having like Ebola, for example, over here?
Was that not, was it 2017, 2018, around that? I remember there was that bad Ebola outbreak, and then I remember they closed a bunch of hospitals in London because someone had traveled over. So I guess had lots of us not been vaccinated to that point, there would have been a horrific outbreak in the UK. But I'm going to double check exactly when that was, but I'll let you finish your thought though.
But I'm assuming then, was that caused by someone who hadn't had the vaccine?
I don't want to misquote the information, but I suspect it was there was an outbreak somewhere, and I think Western Africa. Again, take this with a pinch of salt. I'm not 100% about where or when it was. 2014 to 2016 outbreak in West Africa. Yes, it was. Yeah, there's an outbreak in Uganda 2023. So Ebola is still a very prevalent disease, actually, way more than I think I've perhaps given it credit in the last few minutes. But yeah, I guess it's interesting, isn't it? If you work abroad, or actually if you're in contact with anyone that works in any countries where these are still kind of prevalent diseases, then I guess thank God we are vaccinated against them, right?
Obviously, the main thing that comes down to all of the vaccines that you get is when you were, I want to say under the age of 16, but probably even after that, probably under the age of 18, you kind of got certain vaccines like through school and stuff. That like you and I were talking beforehand, where when the girls got the HPV vaccine.
Yes, I felt so left out.
But like 2 years in a row, you get two. I think it was two Jags each year, so you got like
Right.
1 year. And I am actually not sure of the statistic. This is where we need Zoe, but I'm not sure of the statistic of girls that have contracted HPV since the
Yeah.
we in like vaccines against it. Like I don't know if it's made like a massive difference to it. That would be interesting to know. But yeah, I just always thought it was funny because you were sitting in like this in my school. It was on the stage and they shut the curtains, and there was like
So
you
performative.
like there was like a walkway above, and people used to be able to look down and watch where you were getting your vaccine. You were like, oh,
Oh, that's so intrusive.
so that was funny. But yeah, you used to have to you used to come out of whatever period you were in. You used to just sit with your hand to your arm, and your arm would go so dead, like the next day, and like
Yeah.
don't touch my arm because it's so sore.
I always remember at school, whenever you got like a vaccine, you would just never tell anyone because they'd punch your arm.
Honestly, I don't know if that's just a Scottish thing or if that is like happening globally, but fucking Scottish men were just wee shit. A dig in the arm, pure pain.
Yeah. I guess just kind of moving on to the obvious thing that we've not mentioned yet, which is that quite a lot of us have potentially had vaccines over the last couple of years because of the COVID outbreak. And I guess that's why we're even having this conversation, probably because it's much more of a hot topic, right? And I think there's a lot of thoughts and feelings about that and ways that it's happened. And a lot of people are very vocal about their strong opinions one way or the other on every platform possible. I guess just like from an absolute base level, is that a good thing that everyone's so vocal about opinions? It's funny, isn't it? Because we always say in these dangerous dialogues, we're like, we encourage you to have your own conversation. But actually, for the first time ever, we're having a conversation that everyone else has already had.
I would say that yes, it's never like freedom of speech. I am all for people having their own opinions. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And it gives, so if someone was, let's say, like let's give the two extremes. Let's say either the one extreme or the other.
Yeah.
If someone their opinion on a public platform and you read it and you really agree with one or the other, it will kind of make you feel not so alone in your own thought, which
Sure.
I totally appreciate and understand. As in, I think everyone should have their feelings and thoughts heard and know that their feelings and thoughts aren't just their own, that
Yeah.
their thoughts are to be like concurred with, like someone else also agrees with that thought. But it's the same with like the age-old fucking thing. Like if you're one way and I'm the other, I can't tell you that your opinion is wrong.
Yeah.
And tell me that my opinion is wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
The age-old thing, and this can overlap into every topic and everything known to man, woman, and child. Like, you're your own being and your own identity, and everything about you is you.
Right.
I do what to do and what to get and what vaccinations you should have had or you shouldn't have had.
Yeah.
So it's the same with everyone. We can all have our opinions and our own choices to do what we want to do, but we can't force the opinions or force the thought onto anyone else. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think where this is a conversation has gone, not this current conversation, I just mean vaccinations as a conversation in general, is that I think there is a disagreement to what you've just said, that actually people are like, no, you absolutely have to get this because it's a global pandemic. How the fuck are we going to get out of it unless people are not going to get it? So I can understand that as a viewpoint, because it, at absolute base level, quite a few people would have to be, I guess, vaccinated for some level of a disappearance of a device of a virus. I don't know, device and virus are the same fucking thing in my head. It's because I have so many devices around me. But the conversation is divisive. Go on. But yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think people in that conversation feel that they're entitled to tell you things because they feel like it affects them. It's like, you not getting a vaccine affects me, because it does, I guess, potentially in a COVID circumstance. Does it on other ones like we've mentioned before? Maybe not, I don't know.
Although this is us, and this is me really going to fuck things up here. This is me me also saying that, oh yeah, me not getting the vaccine would really implicate and harm you, for example, because you are high risk and you have asthma.
Right.
But this is us also saying that it fucking works.
Very true. Yeah.
So this is us also saying that my actions will definitively impact yours, but will they? Did we just all get fucking injected with jelly? Like, did we actually get injected with something that will fight the virus? Did we all just get injected with water? Like, did we get injected with the flu jab that we've already had? Like, this is the thoughts. So
yeah, I think it's that we obviously were injected with something that worked to an extent, whatever it was. I mean, the ingredients are there on the pamphlet that you get given, are they not?
did it work, or did we all just develop an immunity because
I mean,
we it's like you develop an immunity to everything when you're exposed to it. So did we all just become exposed to it in some manner? Some hit worse with it than others, and then we just, as a whole society and a whole world, then evolved.
I just don't think you can evolve past something that kills you.
But then do you think other people's immune systems were just weaker than others?
Oh, 100. I mean, my immune system is genuinely weaker than yours, as we were just discussing there. So yeah, but I mean, bizarrely, I also had COVID 3 times. And I've had 3 jabs. So I'm not trying to make a correlation there. That sounded like I did. I'm not saying 3 jabs equals 3 COVIDs. Fuck off, Brian. But it's true though.
I would love to hear Brian's.
Go on.
I would love to hear Brian's opinion.
Well, it's interesting because Brian, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, pretty much because we have a relatively small flat that the two of us just live in. I mean, if one of us got COVID, the other just got COVID. As careful as we were, it just happened. And
yeah, and left all his shit everywhere.
Usually Colby's really atting you here, Brian. But I guess it's interesting because by the time we had COVID the first time, I had already had a jab. And I think both of us reacted horrifically when we had COVID because it was that first time was really, really, really bad. And we were saying this beforehand, I swear if I hadn't had some vaccination, I just feel like I would have died because it was so bad. I really do. I feel like it helped. But Brian is not asthmatic. He doesn't have any major underlying health problems. So, sorry, Brian, I'm kind of speaking on about you here. That's fine, it's all truthful. It's true. Thank you. I don't know if you heard that. But I think Brian was affected probably equally as bad as I was at the time. And he doesn't have any underlying health issues. So that's, and I don't think he had a vaccine by that point at all. So that's why I'm making the comparison, because I'm comparing, because I had a vaccine and I'm immunely worse than him, and our effects were fairly similar at the time. I don't know. That's my own personal experiences, as we've already said, is all that we can go off of sometimes.
Yeah. Do you think that if the vaccine had been like shelled out to people faster, or like do you think if we had gone through the vaccination process faster, people would have been like, there would have been a lesser toll of people getting COVID, or a lesser like death rate of people dying from it? Like,
I think that's like a two-pronged question in a way, because I don't think we could have gone through the process any quicker, because the vaccine still has to go through all the proper procedures to make sure it is a vaccine that is proper and works and isn't going to majorly harm masses and masses of people. So no to that bit. But yeah, I think had the process been started earlier, then yeah, perhaps lives would have been saved. Yeah, I mean, I think COVID is as a topic on its own. It's a dangerous dialogue we could have, right? But I do think the UK handled COVID like terribly. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I think it's made me think though that there's a misconception, isn't there? Which is, I guess, misinformation was something we were going to talk about this evening anyway. But there's a misconception that the vaccine stops you from getting something. It doesn't. It prevents it from being really bad. And just reading one of Zoe's comments here, because I've got the YouTube comments up beside us. Zoe, to your point earlier, had both HPV vaccines and got HPV. So interesting. I think that's a good example that, you know, it prevents the really shit stuff from happening, but it doesn't to all. And I think that's an interesting thought. It's that railway trolley scenario where it's like a vaccine is going to do something to someone, potentially.
that's you, we don't know.
Exactly. Is it for the many or is it for the few? You know, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess you've got to weigh that up probably. Like, I think it's very hard to have these really big jobs where you're really making giant decisions about a whole millions of people's lives. But I can't even imagine what that process is like to think through of like, well, I've got to roll out this vaccine because it could save millions of lives, but it will potentially harm maybe hundreds.
It would be interesting to know how many people that died had actually had any form of vaccine.
Yeah, I don't know the stats on that, but yeah, I do agree. It would be interesting to know.
Interesting. Simply because it would then sort of literally correlate with exactly what you've just said, as in, would it be the rollout of a vaccine to save millions, However, a few would die. And I say a few in that, obviously, thousands of people died from COVID.
Millions.
However, something that I don't know if the COVID statistics were wholeheartedly true, in that when people died throughout the COVID era, I'm going to call it, unless you were super switched on at that time and process of your loved one dying, like, people have gone back and looked at their loved ones' death certificates, and it was lung cancer and COVID. Like, COVID was put on their loved one's death certificate, and they didn't have COVID.
It makes sense to me, though, that there's multiple things on a death certificate, using like a previous epidemic as an example. AIDS isn't necessarily the thing that killed you, but it's the thing that weakened your immune system to give you the other thing. So you could have still died of a cancer, of a blah 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 blah, but you ultimately wouldn't have got that if it wasn't for contracting HIV in the first place. So I think it's fairly similar with COVID, that it weakens your immune system. It's really fighting hard. Go on.
He didn't have it at point of death.
Can you give me a second? It started raining.
Yeah. Oh no, has he got washing out?
It's like a Dangerous Dialogues first. I'm taking Brian's washing in because it started raining. I'm sorry, to actually answer your question explicitly there. I can't speak specifically for that, because I don't know why it would be put on a death certificate if someone didn't have it. But I think you would have to see some evidence that they did or didn't. I mean, if it's on a medical document, my instinct would be that, well, they must have.
So interesting. So interesting. Sorry, I'm still half laughing at the fact that you were like, pause.
I've never had to do that before in this, because normally the other people that are here would just talk and I would go and sort out the thing. But it's because I put Brian's watch aside. It's like the heavens opened. Anyway, I guess a lot of what we're kind of edging towards is about misinformation. And I think the way that we consume information, and not just now in the sort of 2020s, when a lot of that is through social media or through very niche channels of information. Because I think even in the 90s with MMR, everyone was really scared about autism, and that the MMR was going to give you autism, because there was someone that said something about it at some point. And that's really interesting that. Yeah, sorry, it just started to rain. I was like, I better take it in. No, I just realised it was raining as well. So sorry, Colby. Why have our Dangerous Dialogues for the last few weeks been fucking mental? 2 weeks ago, we were trying to chat about coping with death, and Zoe got her cleavage out. But yeah, it's interesting that, I guess, this comes back to what you were talking about earlier. Where is it that you get that information from, and what is your personal opinion based on? I don't mean you personally, I just mean generally.
Yes.
Yeah, how do you make those decisions? Can you always go to several professors and doctors that have studied it? No. So yeah, do you just believe the fellow on the telly? Do you just believe wee Jeannie on Facebook? Like,
It is so, like, the weird thing about the news and stuff, I genuinely, and I mean this wholeheartedly, I genuinely could not tell you the last time I watched the news. Could not tell you.
Yeah.
And it's simply because I'm like, if something is really important, and I mean like really important, I will find out through people talking about it, social
Right.
media. Like, and I mean several people, not just one person being like,
Yeah.
I guess falling, like fucking chicken run, chicken little.
That's where I get my news from, is Chicken Run and Chicken Little, yeah.
Um, don't make me talk about chicken run. I'll be like, don't want a pie, I don't like gravy.
We need to do a dangerous dialogue on sequels
Oh my god.
and
Yes.
whether they're necessary or not. But anyway.
But yes, I couldn't tell you the last time I watched the news simply because it's just a load of shit. It's just a load of depressing fucking bullshit. And the amount of stupid shit that you see, like, I had something come up on my timeline the other day, and it was of people arguing on Good Morning Britain about like splitting a bill. And it's like, is this really is this the news? Like, is this what you want to impart?
But I think it's interesting. I think those programs and channels have responded to the way that people do consume news now. They consume arguments on the internet. They like people jibing each other. They like people making controversial statements. And I think that the way that programs that like daily breakfast shows, whatever, have changed is in response to that.
So strange.
Isn't it?
So
But equally, you're right. The last time I actively switched on the news was last week, because of all the big news stories that were happening last week, and I wanted to see what BBC News had to say about it all. So that's why I switched on the news, and that's the first time I'd done that in a very long time. Yeah, I mean, we get our news right to our phone.
I
Like,
know.
that's it. It comes up right there. That's
Yeah.
it. News. So why would I go and consume a breakfast television show? I'm not even out of bed. Or a news show. I just, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess it's interesting that channels, like particularly big right-wing media giants that have kind of risen recently, there's obviously a channel that currently are under investigation for what they've said about vaccinations, and I think that perhaps their news audience is quite a niche audience, and that audience perhaps or have already bought into that conversation, so may not have changed their mind. But it's hard to say that it doesn't. It was what you said earlier. If you see someone agree with you, you think it validates your own thought and feeling, right? So if you see someone else go, that vaccine is bad, you're like, oh, I must be right then. Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's not. It's not a good thing.
I mean, it isn't. It isn't. Until you're proven otherwise. Are they allowed to then have their own thought? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But it's like innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah. Except for badgers.
Except for badgers.
Yeah. No, the law about badgers says that if you're carrying a badger, it's believed that you're going to do a harm to it. So you're guilty until proven innocent with badgers. Anyway, yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? And I think vaccines and your opinions on them can't be distilled down to right and left and political views, because it's not as basic as that, really. But it's funny because a lot of news and media is presented in a right and left format. So yeah, it's funny because you kind of feel. I think I know a few people who haven't received vaccines, but feel incredibly bad for it. And don't necessarily talk about it because they associate it with like right wing extreme points of view, and they aren't that. So yeah, weird, isn't it?
Even weirdly, because I was self-isolating for so much of COVID,
Yeah.
my mum and I didn't get COVID vaccines for, would that be right? I don't think I had my first COVID vaccine until after my mum died,
Wow.
which essentially means I got all of my COVID jags, and I got three. I got a COVID jag, and a booster,
Yeah.
all in the space of a year and a half. And I only got a COVID jag, and a booster because I booked a trip to America and I wasn't allowed to go unless I got a COVID jag, and a booster.
Yeah.
So if there was no rule against me being able to travel with only one COVID jag, I wouldn't have got the other two.
Interesting. And I mean, we talked about this before we came on, but that's the like guilt trip thing, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
actually
100%.
removes the element of choice.
Exactly. Like, I had already booked this holiday, and it wasn't until we were reading into all of the like things that we had to, like, we were getting at that excited phase and like all this shit that we had to do. And I remember literally a month before we had to go, we were like, you must have this, this, and this. And I was like, holy shit. And it was a point, Mark had his second COVID jag. I can't remember for what reason, but I had to get my second jag and my booster literally within 5 weeks of one another.
Wow.
Just so I could go on this holiday. And like, in order for me to get on the plane, we had to get a PCR done
Yeah.
to show, and we had to send it to the airline. Our flight then got cancelled and rebooked for the next day. We then had to
No.
go to Edinburgh Airport and get another rapid PCR done.
Yeah.
Send it back in. But like, all this stupid shit you had to do in the fucking COVID days, man. But yes, I do strongly believe that if it hadn't been for me booking a trip to America, I would still be living with one COVID jag.
Yeah.
I mean, I got COVID, but I only got COVID after I had my first COVID jag.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Mark,
I was the same, but I still think it helped.
do you?
Yeah, I really do.
I don't know. I think it, because I watched, well, I don't know if I'm just going to out my own boyfriend here, but I watched Mark have COVID first,
Yeah.
and Mark, like, oh, like Mark was like on the struggle bus.
Yeah.
And when I had COVID, I called into my work and I called my boss and I was like, got COVID, I'm so sorry. And then I was like, spring cleaning. I was like cleaning out my drawer.
What? Are you kidding me? Oh my God.
I was like cleaning out my drawers, pure spring cleaning. And Mark was like, you're fucking mental. Will you lie down? I'm like, I'm literally fine. I am fine.
The third time I got COVID, I could still kind of get up and do things. The first two times, not at all. That first time, I think there was like a good 5 days where I just like physically couldn't even leave my bed. It
No.
was not nice.
Although just shows the different severity that people got COVID, and it's totally dependent on you and your immune system. Like, Tom, when we love you, but your immune system is fucking shit.
It's shite. It is shite. Yeah.
So shit. So,
but then I don't necessarily feel like that's, yes, okay, that is a valid point. But using Brian again as an example, his immune system's pretty good going. And it was really bad for him as well that first time going. So Yeah, I guess also it depends, doesn't it? There's so many strains, so many different COVIDs.
Strains, and also like tolerances, pain tolerances,
Yeah.
all that jazz.
Come on, babe, why don't you get a vaccine? That was being asked for. Come on. Um, we've talked a bit about choice there, and I feel like the last thing I just wanted to bring up was um, so many media outlets in the States have been like, it's my body, it's my choice what I do. Don't have to get a vaccine if I don't want to. And you're like, yeah, sure, cool. How do you feel about abortion? um,
Hate it.
why why? Why is it not their body and their choice then?
No. It's ridiculous that they cannot make that correlation themselves, which is crazy.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is the same thing.
Because if their argument is that, oh yeah, but that's a living life down there, it's like, okay, well, if that's what you believe, what why is it then your choice? Like, why can you make informed choices about your children not getting vaccinated, but that adult can't make informed choices about what you're calling their child? Mad.
Yeah.
Zoe has been kind of commenting along as we've gone. And sorry, I've tried to say as much as I can of her things. She did mention that our coping with death conversation was definitely helped by her titties. So the more you know. Is this a sex thing? Does women deal with maybe gender does play into it all. I mean, I guess we all got the same vaccines, but our bodies all work differently, don't they? But then I don't know that. I don't know if it comes down to sex or I don't know. I think this is it, isn't it? It's a hard thing to know everything about. We never, as people, unless we go and commit our lives to it, would know everything about it. Yeah. Before we came on, just last anecdote. I was working on a show at the sort of latter end of COVID when there was still a lot of restrictions in place, but shows could happen. And it was a really exciting show. It was big, and it was, one of the few things that was happening in the Fringe, and we had an entire venue to ourselves. So it was really cool, and we did like 70 shows, and a lot of them sold out. It was great, lovely, jubbly. Right at the end, I was the production manager on this show for context, so health and safety things were down to me. Right at the end of the run, unfortunately, one of our team COVID, and I have to say they hit them hard. But I then had to call around our team and give them what the government's advice was at that time based on vaccination status, because that was my responsibility, was their safety, right? And it was difficult because a couple of them, understandably, it is their right, didn't want to share what their kind of vaccination statuses were. Fine, but there was no judgment in my question. I didn't care whether they did or didn't. Also, it was at that point where some people weren't yet vaccinated because they were too young, and it wasn't rolled out to that last age group yet, the sort of lower age group. And so I certainly wasn't asking from like a perspective of judgment. I had to give the right advice to the right people, because they all had to go and do different things on the legal requirements of the governments based on what our situation was there. And because some of them couldn't tell me anything, I couldn't give them any advice. There was nothing I could do, and I just had to say, well, I can't give you any advice. You can't come into work because I can't advise you the way in which you could come into work. So you're going to have to go and do your own research on that. And that's shit. I'd love to be able to help you. And that's just such a shit situation, isn't it? Because it's the people that didn't want to share, totally their right. But I could do nothing to help them, and they didn't feel comfortable enough to receive that, if that makes sense whatsoever. Yeah. So yeah, it's funny that, you know, there's this like stigma around even expressing your own opinions on it. Wow.
Yeah.
Brian. Anyway, we better sign off because I think it's quite loud. So thank you. And thank you, Zoe, for kind of contributing in like this.
Sally.
Last thing, what are we taking away from this conversation? We always got to take something away from a conversation.
That the vaccine. What?
I'm laughing at you'd be like, fuck, I've got to say something.
Something deep and meaningful to say.
Sorry, I love you, deep and meaningful.
That the vaccine saved Tom's life.
Or so Tom thinks.
No, we'll just say the vaccine did.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Zoe's takeaway is that needles still scare her. She spelled scare wrong, but I know what she was trying to say. They still scare me. She's share. The needles scare me. What I'm taking away from this is that I think I need to reassess, that when we always say in these conversations that you should go and have your own conversation,
maybe don't.
No, do absolutely talk to people, absolutely be comfortable in your opinion and be willing to learn, but have a level of information or research to then inform those opinions. I think is probably what I'm going to take away, because I was well at my depth talking about Ebola there. I don't fucking know enough about it, so I'm going to do some Ebola research someday. Okay, sweet. We're going to sign off. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see some people again soon. Bye. 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 Bye.